Good evening. Warm welcome to every one of you to this 7-day national webinar on gender equality prerequisite for sustainable development. The 7-day webinar is scheduled during 25th to 31st October 2020. The program is designed at 5 p.m. as all of us, we have our online classes during the morning section. The resource person for today is Professor Manonmaniam. Before getting into the profile of the resource person, let us start our 7 days workshop with the blessings of our Honorable Vice Chancellor by his inaugural address.
Colleagues, good morning to all. On behalf of MS University, I have great pleasure in welcoming you all on our organized by the Center for Women Empowerment and Women's Studies. Dear colleagues, gender equality has always been the necessity for the development of a country. Inclusion of both genders equally will improve GDP tremendously. Indian GDP can grow by a staggering 60% if more women start working. Education actually increases confidence in a woman. And educated women can easily understand the demerits of early marriage and high birth rate. They have the attitude of gender parity among the children through healthcare, nutrition, education, and even career. The fruits of education are employed and enjoyed not only by the women concerned, but it's also passed to her family in later life. There are several factors which access of women to education. Factors like poor economic conditions, which is all the more relevant among the rural poor, socio-cultural traditions, sex segregation of colleges and universities from their home, negative attitude of family members, and lack of family teachers. So these are some of the issues which have relevance to empowering women through education. Uh, in this context, period uh, impact this virus as a consequence of COVID pandemic. Women are the most hardest hit. They are also at the same time also backbone for recovery in the community. Putting women and girls at the center of economies will fundamentally drive better and more sustainable development outcomes for all. Support a more rapid recovery and place the world back on a footing to achieve sustainability development goals. In this context, the COVID-19 pandemic also provides us an opportunity for world. And every COVID-19 response plans and every recovery package and budgeting of resources needs to address the gender impacts of the pandemic. It is also very vital to develop a rapid and targeted response to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 crisis on women and girls, and to ensure that the long-term recovery benefits all. This can be focused on areas. For example, the first one, violence, including domestic violence, should be mitigated and social protection. Economic stimulus packages should serve also more women and girls more specifically. And transforming the inequalities of unpaid care work into a new inclusive care economy that works for all women, and that should be taken care of. And girls participate in their participation, COVID-19 response planning and decision making should also be improved. And finally, data and coordination mechanisms should also include gender perspectives. So, after all these significant developments as a consequence of COVID-19 pandemic, this webinar assumes greater significance in promoting gender equality, and what are the strategies which can be adopted, and what are the challenges before women and girls in particular. This is very much relevant, and I am very thankful to the Center for Studies for organizing this webinar. I'm sure the deliberations of this webinar will enrich our participants and also the students, which will provide them the necessary indicators to account together in their academic. I wish the conference great success. I also take this opportunity to thank Dr. B. Revati, who is the organizer of this program and who is also the director of Center for Empowerment and Women's Studies. I wish the conference a great success. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir, for your inaugural address for this 7-day national webinar on gender equality, prerequisite for sustainable development, organized by the Center for Women Empowerment and Women's Studies of Manonmaniam, Sundaranar University, Tirunelveli, in collaboration with Regional Association for Women's Studies. Thank you, sir, for all your support, motivation, and your kindness for all the endeavors of the Center for Women Empowerment and Women's Studies of our Manonmaniam Sundaranar University. It's my pleasure to welcome the resource person for today's section, Professor N. Mani Mehalai, Director and Head, Department of Women's Studies, Bharatdasan University, Tiruchirappalli, Tamil Nadu. Her topic of address is gender gaps in achievements and sustainable development. A short description of her profile. Professor Mani Mehalai, she has done her doctorate in economics and her specialization is industrial economics. She is the founder director, Center for Women's Studies, Bharatdasan University. She is currently the Dean, Faculty of Arts, Member Senate, Director and Head, Department of Women's Studies, Bharatdasan University, Tiruchirappalli, Tamil Nadu, where extensively work on gender and development studies. She has completed 3 weeks MHRD supported LEAP at IIT Bombay and NTU Singapore 2019. Formerly, she was the professor of economics. She has research supervisorship in Bharatdasan University, Mother Teresa University, Korea University in Economics, Women's Studies and Management Disciplines. She has to her credit 15 years of professorship in economics and women's studies and in administration each. She has 29 years of teaching and research experience since 1991. She has produced 17 PhDs in economics, management, and women's studies disciplines. She has introduced MA, MPhil, PhD, certificate, diploma, PG diploma programs, and skill training, short-term courses in women's studies, gender studies, women entrepreneurship development, micro and small enterprises development, research skills, etc. She has served as a member senate as governor nominee for 2 years in Mother Teresa and Tiruvallur universities for 6 years. She is an advisory committee member for more than 20 women's studies centers in India. She is the chairperson, boards of studies in women's studies in 4 universities and member boards of studies in economics, women's studies, NGO management, etc. in more than 20 colleges and universities. She is a member in college management committee, member of college council, academic council member in more than 10 universities and colleges.
I think it is enough, Dr. Revati. We can proceed. We just
Yes,
finish it off.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am, for accepting our invitation and have
you.
given your consent to be the resource person for the first day of our 7 days program. Thank you, ma'am. Warm welcome to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. At the outset, I thank the Honorable Vice Chancellor of Manonmaniam Sundaranar University for collaborating the 7-day program. It's a national webinar on gender equality as a prerequisite for sustainable development. And I specifically thank Dr. Revati for all her hard efforts and intensive following it up also with participants, and also handling all these technical support, etc. And I also thank all my RAS office bearers for their consent to collaborate this 1 week program there with Center for Women Empowerment and Women Study Center of Manonmaniam University, Tirunelveli. And I have chosen to. There are a 7 day. It's a 7 day program, and I'm happy that Dr. Revati included Sundays also. That is why we are here today. I could not see how many participants are there, but I only feel that I have forwarded this to several All India participants group, and therefore definitely you would be there, and tomorrow onwards also, if not, if you miss this Sunday, you would certainly be joining, or others will join the subsequent days. So the topic which I have chosen to talk today is gender gaps and achievements in sustainable development. So in that, I think Dr. Revati will present the PPT which I have shared. That is just suggestive, but I kept talking. So there are 17 sustainable goals, which I'll talk later. Before that, let me spend a few minutes on what is sustainable development and why sustainable development, etc. And then move on to two important aspects. Thanks to the Vice Chancellor also, who has highlighted all the important aspects which are to be addressed in the context of gender equality as a precondition for sustainable development. You can go to the next slide. Sustainable development, where and this is, of course, you will find in on the website the 17 sustainable development goals of UN. That picture alone has been brought. So I just define here. You can go to the full screen. Sustainable development. You all must be aware, who are all in the development sector or working on the development studies, would certainly be aware of the origin of this actual concept of sustainable development, which was described by the Brundtland Commission report in 1987, way back in 1987, almost around 40 years, and which defines sustainable development as development that meets the very quote unquote needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations. So whatever now we have the resource, this resource must be available for the future generation also. Who are the future generation? Our own sons, daughters, and our own cousins. So our people, our family members, they'll become the population of the country, future generation of the country. So we are enjoying whatever the availability of the natural resources, be it water or air or the other resources. But this in no account you should leave the future generation without these resources. Whatever you enjoy must be available for the future generation, our own heirs of the family. So when you think of that, say for example, now itself we started carrying water. We should not push our generation to carry the water. I mean, of course, water will continue to or the air. Our forefathers never carried water bottle with them. If at all they will carry water, they'll boil the water and take in their own vessels, a flask or whatever. They never bought the water bottle from this market, and you never the water bottle, because the water was pure. Wherever you go, you can take the water. But now you're so conscious that the water is not as pure, and if you take that water, which is quote unquote, you feel that it is not pure, purified in the sense, is not healthy, it will cause infection. And of course, water is the major agent which will create infection. So I just say water. There are other resources also. You can't just desert the resources. You keep on exploiting the nature, where you will done away with all the natural resources, and the future generation will definitely be lacking with. Sometimes you may not be even leaving some of the natural resources which were available or were available for our ancestors and to next generation, they will be missing too. And so this is what I mean, the sustainable development. So if the future generation must also be equipped with, endowed with the whatever the kind of resources which we are enjoying, we have to take care of the sustainability, quote unquote. So there are 4 dimensions of sustainable development. What are they? That is, first is the society, the environment, the culture, and economy. All the 4 important, all are equally important. Whenever you talk about sustainable development, it is the society. So society, you have to have a concern over society. Society means it is again the people, our own relatives, our own friends, our own cousins. So the society composed of all the resources, not just the human resource. So all the resources must be. So when I talk about the resources or the next generation, it is that we also count other all living beings. It is not just human beings alone. So all the living beings must also be having their own what I should say. For instance, you are talking about the elephants coming out and destructing human habitats. So this is not because of not the fault of the elephants. The elephants are there in their own area, their own boundary, which is nothing but the forest area. But we have encroached the forest area and started building houses, residential apartments, and therefore they are they bound to come. So it is not that the elephants are intruding, but the people have intruded, and you have distracted the resources, forest resources. Otherwise, it will be available as reserved for the only animal habitats. And so that is what. Then environment. It is also equally like whatever I have said. Also environment. The deforestation. If you do cut trees, you have to hope for afforestation. So you have to balance it. You have cut 4 trees means you raise 8 trees. Then only you will be able to balance. Then culture. So you have your own, say for example, indigenous culture. For each country has its own. You have resources, natural resources. There are Amazon forests, which is fully covered by forest and trees, whereas there are completely deserts also. The Dar desert where nothing is found. So this is the kind of an economy or the resource or environment you have. I mean, so diverse and extremes also. So the culture also will be associated with the kind of natural resource you have. You must be knowing Chipko movement where men were cutting the trees and women went and hugged. And if you want to, they said that if you want to cut a tree, please first cut us and then you cut the tree. So that is what the women were associating themselves with nature. And in several point, it is the people who will definitely be associating with themselves with the culture, and above all the economy. So these are the 4 important. There is in economics there is a theory. It is called Phillips curve. So Phillips curve, what does it say is that it is like a U-shaped curve. It says that there has to be a trade-off between the development and the environment. So you can go on and exploit the resources for developmental purposes, but beyond a stage you should not. So that is why, like if you there is a point up to which you can go on using resources, because resources are there plenty and therefore no issues. But if you keep on doing it after certain saturation point, that is what I said, the trade-off. You have to compromise. That is what it is happening. And if you are a student of environmental economics or in economics, you have a paper on environment, you must have studied all these things, that there is a payment is permits are being given. Like if you want to use this resource over exploit more than what is permitted, you have to pay get permits. But even that is not right, because you have to stop using the resources. By using the permits, you should not. So please keep in mind these four dimensions while talking about sustainable development. And so the society, there is woe missing. So UNESCO is defining. Please retain first, second slide. I haven't come to this slide. So the sustainable development is a paradigm for thinking about the future in which environmental, societal, and economic considerations are balanced. That is what you can't just elephant coming. So it has to sustainability is possible. For example, a prosperous society relies on healthy environment to provide food and resources, safe drinking water, and clean air for its citizens. So this is what sustainability means. It means no one suffer without basic. So what is the need for sustainable? So having said that, there are four dimensions: the society, the environment, economy, which join. We have to necessarily safeguard these resources, and that is that is why you have and the sustainable. So what is the need for sustainable development? There are three important dimensions. One is this climate change, the other is scarcity of resources, the other is over exploitation of natural resources. See, these three are again interconnected. Climate change, I have already sufficiently told, giving some examples, like here increase in atmospheric temperature or extreme weather events. So whatever the kind of a temperature which we experience, or erratic seasonal, monsoon, then it is because of the climate change. You are supposed to get your the monsoon somewhere in September, October. If you're not getting, and it does come there in June or December or January, then it is erratic. And whatever you have been following earlier to go for the first season in June and second season crop for in December, whatever, it won't be sustaining. That is what I mean to say. So people will be starving. The first season they won't be cultivating anything because the rain has failed, and the monsoon has failed, and then in December the land won't be fitting for. So that is what the formation, the pattern of the agriculture or farming has been taking place. And if season changes, it is quite difficult for the natural natures to cope up with. And also rising sea levels, extinction threat to small island nations due to climate change. You have witnessed already several countries, their sea level is increasing and they are losing their space, and it shouldn't come to other countries also. So this is about climate change. Climate change is also the outcome of the human action. It is not that nature has created this issue of climate change. And you know what is the implications of climate change, and what is the specific gender implications of climate change, and how the scarcity of water, scarcity of resources, food scarcity, all these will have implication on gender, particularly women. And women will be disproportionately affected by the environmental degradation, lack of resources, climate change, etc. And the third is, second important aspect which justifies the need for sustainable development is scarcity of resource. So, you, on the one hand, the climate change also has its implications on resource, because you are over exploited the resources, and the resources which are available, which were available for development purposes, now are not available, and therefore you will suffer, and that led to scarcity of resources, because the natural resource given is limited. And that is what we in economics read, that the land is a scarce resource. So you cannot just expand. Renewable resources are very, very limited. And this is a space. This is a space on which you have to work. You can expand the space because the space is limited, land is limited, the land resource, the natural resource is limited. You may go for some non-renewable renewable resources, but that also you have to have technology. For example, we are talking about energy. We have been saying that the solar energy is the best, which will save the energy, and it is also coming from the nature, but we are not really expanding it. We have invented the technology, and there are development solar energy installation happening in few households, in few institutions, but it is not mainstreamed. It should go as a mainstream, like you have the electricity hydroelectric generated. Of course, you have also installed windmills, and but a huge investment is required, and also it is region specific. You can't raise windmill and generate energy, electricity in all the area. Wherever the wind is very, it is windy, you will be able to. So that is what you may be able to identify in future years to come, some technology which will help in generating renewable energy, but still technology also may not be helping every time. Then, so scarcity of resources in two ways. One is the food production, which needs to double over the next 40 years. So whatever the food now production we have now, in next 40 years, you have to double. So accordingly, you have to have, because the population will double, and the food production needs to double to feed that increasing population. Particularly, China and India still are the major countries constituting majority of the population, and other countries also. And so they have to be fed. So where are we now? So in 40 years at a time, when almost 23% of our old agricultural land has been degraded. See, what has to be, if the 23% or 50% of the land must be available additional in order to have double the production of food. But unfortunately, you have last one fourth of the land which is already got degraded. Then nearly two-thirds of the world's population will be living in water scarce, water stressed areas of 2000. Not very far. It's only 2025, where it is estimated that half of two-thirds of the population. That means whatever if we are three, two will be suffering in the area where water scarcity would be the norm. So this is what the scarcity of resources. Important is water, and water is the base. And only when water is available, you will be able to go for food production. So food production has to happen, and it has to double in 40 years. But unfortunately, the land is one fourth of the land is already being degraded. The third component is over exploitation of natural resources. So this is also pressurize the need for sustainable development. That is what I said, the flip curve, where you have to have a trade-off. So you have almost utilized the resources available. You cannot go on dig, whether it is the mining or river water resources, or the other resources, electricity generation, etc. You have already utilized, and that is why there is a nature's carrying capacity, and you have exploited already because of various reasons. And developed countries are blaming the developing countries for the pollution, for overpopulation. But developed countries consume, developed countries and the other advanced countries are really consuming more energy than us. And therefore, population cannot be one of the reasons for polluting. But we cannot also say that whatever new increasing population, we can't just leave. We have to also create, feed them, create space for them to live, and density will be the pressure. And the food production, that is what it is given. The decline of more than 60% of the world's marine generated is being generated in a particular point of I mean, it is particular space, I should say. In Trichy, I am here. It is said that around 400 tons of case. Where is the space to? So simply they dump in the water bodies, and water bodies in the beginning they had the natural evaporation process and just took even the industrial effluents which not much treated and let out there on the water bodies also now have implications, and those effluent without treating the effluent and letting it on the water bodies have a pressure on the marine resources, and particularly fish, and fish started dying, and the varieties and the different type of fish resources are also died, and 1 million species on track of extinction. This is the danger. So that is what sustainable development is very important, and we are going to lose in the next generation some of the species which we can only see there on the museum, and we have to say to next generation that it was exist. So extension shouldn't be there, be it the marine resources or any other resources. Next slide. So what we have to do? I was talking about the society, the environment, the culture, and economy. So there are three. I mean, similarly, so there are four P's, I should say. One is politics. So sustainable product practice is also related to politics. I was talking about how the developed countries are blaming or the first world countries are blaming the third world countries for population as the cause for creating pollution and the global warming or the whatever the climate change, etc. And this is what the politics, I should say. They consume the per capita consumption of energy, whether it is the electricity or water or other resources, that is several times higher than the per capita consumption of the people here in the developing countries. But unfortunately, they are saying that it is the developing countries. So politically, it should be done. So in this slide, I'm explaining the global perspective, local action. So in order to ensure sustainable development, what has to be done? So first, you have to talk on. I mean, focus on water, food, and energy. These are the three important areas for which the sustainable practices are to be introduced, wherein we have to have politics, the people, the planet, and the profit also. So the technology diffusion must be there, and you have to develop appropriate technology, and that technology must be transferred and commercialized for the purpose of development, and you can adopt that particular technology to whatever to energy or water or food. Okay, next slide. And there are also region specific issues related to sustainable development, the deforestation which I was talking about, because you keep exploiting the tree, I mean cutting the trees for the construction purpose or any other purpose. In fact, when I visited there in Spain, every building has this flooring with the wood only. And I was asking my friend because her house was all here we use tiles, no? There it was all wood, fine wood, teak or something like that. When I asked, she said, "We have plenty of trees, and therefore we are using that." So that is the kind of. So when you say that you have plenty and we use, it should also be available to others. Otherwise, this deforestation will be the issue. Then the desertification and droughts. So you keep on cutting trees, you know the natural process. Only when you have greens, you will have the process working, and rains will be there. And if you are not, then rains will disappear, and therefore drought and desertification will be the result. And on the other hand, there are also other erratic issues like floods and soil erosion, which is happening, which has been experienced recently here in Kerala. The worst form of floods you experienced, and the northeast and the east West Bengal, Orissa, they are ever affected with these floods. So on the one hand, you face droughts, on the other hand, extremely the floods. So and the droughts would also be have implications on the rising sea level. So these are the basic inputs I want to talk about sustainable development, because we are going to have the 7-day seminar on sustainable development. So I have to give some introductory remarks on that. And then I'll try to link with the sustainable development goals, and particularly focusing on gender, because gender equality as a precondition is the topic the theme on which we are going to talk. Next slide. So I'm straight going to the sustainable development goals. By now you all must have got introduced to the sustainable development goals, and some of them you may not be from the development studies, be it or social sciences or science also. You must be knowing about sustainable development. Before I should say what is sustainable development goals. Before that, we had a Millennium Development Goal called MDGs, 8 Millennium Development Goals, and 8 of them are there already in this sustainable development goals also. And it was targeted that by 2015 all the countries in the globe must have reached a certain target in terms of certain goals, whether it is education, whether it is the environment, whether it is the sustain, what I was talking about, gender, etc. And we were not able to complete, and only a few countries could reach to certain extent, not all the 8 MDGs. And therefore, after 2015, UN, in consultation with various partner countries, suddenly came out with the 17 goals. There were we have to also be critical of it. Just because UN has given the sustainable development goals, it is not that it is the be all end all. We have to also see how the targets. I will also be showing in the next slide the targets. So how these targets would have implications, etc. Whether the targets would be reachable, achievable, because in the MDGs also we have failed, because not all the countries are equally equipped. The resources crunch here which we face in India may not be the case there in the Europe or the States, United States. And therefore, we have to have a mark on that. So I have just shown the sustainable development spell out. It is available on the website, but I'll try to just focus on for about 5 minutes just how they are intertwined, and how gender cuts across as the major variable there in all these 17 goals. So no poverty, zero hunger. So if you want to remove poverty, no poverty means you have to eliminate poverty, where eradicate poverty. Gender question must be understood. Poverty always has a women's face. That's what UN says. So if there are only few rice available, you would certainly be, you means the female members of the family will be sacrificing for the sake of the other members of the family. And so it is always the lookout of the women to look for what is to be fed if the family doesn't have any food, particularly in the context of COVID. It was huge challenge for women, because the men also were almost deserted without any work, and it is a complete lockdown. They could not go, and even if you go for borrowing, you are not able to, because every neighbor also experience the same issue. If you go to the money lender, he will charge a huge interest. But still, it was the women who were, because it was revealed in our survey also during the COVID. We did a survey, and several women, particularly the domestic workers, the construction workers, etc., they did not, could not go to work, and therefore suffered a lot. In fact, these women, the earnings of these women were very much helping the family. And second is the zero hunger. Of course, hunger is more than the poverty. And goal 3 is good health and well-being. So it is talking about how health also we have been focusing, and there are certain inequalities in India itself. Several states are well equipped with good health systems, whereas in several countries, states it is not. So that is also one of the major requirements, and wherein gender is an important. So when you talk about women, men, transgender, the health needs are different. It is not that same health can be focused on all these three categories. Therefore, women, of course, women means it is always the maternal and child health. No, women also will have general health issues. So sufficient allocation of resources to and focus also, and gender friendly health policy also are important requirement. And if you do not attend the health needs of women, be it the maternal health or the reproductive health, etc., then overall health cannot be improved. Therefore, you have to be careful on investing on health. Then education, quality education. And the fifth goal is the gender equality. We will be spending some time on that. Then clean water and sanitation, affordable energy. All these are connected. So unless and otherwise, for example, I recently conducted a study on sanitation needs of women at workplaces, where women are not provided with proper sanitation facilities, which has its implications on dropout or absence of labor during their menstrual cycle. Because on other hand, their priorities that they have to make an earning and contribute to the family. Therefore, even without this proper toilet, they just come for work. But during menstrual days, cycles, it is difficult for them, and therefore they completely take leave. Sometimes 3 days or 4 days. So every month, 3-4 days leave means that has implications on their earnings. So it has economic implications, and that will end up in borrowing or even simply starving, and it affect the health because nutrition will be in question. So these are all intertwined, and in all these, whether it is education or health or the sanitation or poverty, all these have its implications on gender. So women and men and stands have different implications, and people who are in rural areas are not really getting benefited out of the development. So whatever the benefits of development which reach here, the urban elites and urbanites are not equally being distributed to rural, and therefore there is always a gap. And the women face they pay double the price for all these things, because it is the patriarchal society where you always expect the women to be in forefront. And even in this COVID context, you all know that 90% of the workers are all sanitary workers or the health workers are all 90% women, and they risk their life and they contributed. And I don't know whether the state has recognized fully in terms of recognizing with the double wage or any incentives, etc. They were only thanking them with clap, universal clap, but not necessarily that any incentives, very attractive incentives have been paid. But these frontline workers are always expected to be at their disposal whenever there is a call, and particularly attending this COVID patients also, positive patients. Then you have all the other in terms of decent work and economic growth. I'll be only concentrating on two important variables, goals. One is the decent work and economic growth, and other one is about the other gender equality. Only I want to say that all these 17 goals are intertwined, interconnected. They are not separate. And gender is nothing but the sociological differences that you find between the men and women in the society. And other marginalized group also. It is not sex. Sex is something which, and it changes time to time, and whatever you experience here. For instance, the girls are all with in the schools or with dress code of salwar now, but some 10-20 years back, it was not allowed. You have to come with apsari or sari, and so it is now comfortable. So that is what I said, gender. It is not sex, it is And now Tamil Nadu government also is, yeah, it has shared to all the universities also. I am dealing with here in Bharadas University as HDG coordinator. And so they have also identified the indicators for each targets, and you have to work on that. So end all forms of discrimination against women and girls everywhere. So if you really want women empowerment to take place, and this women empowerment alone will ensure equality, and that will lead to sustainable development. So if that is happening, that is to happen, you have to end all forms of discrimination, right from the even I should say right from the fetus, because in the fetus itself, sex selective abortions is taking place, and you have this unpreference in the patriarchal society, and hatredness towards girl babies, and therefore the baby girl is killed there in the fetus, called feticide. And similarly it gets extended to other you have denied the very birth of the biggle baby, and if she is born also, it's not much deliberated, and other forms of discrimination, leave alone and the exceptions which prevail in the society. Then eliminate all forms of violence against all women and girls. Every now and then we keep hearing that now the Hartas case is going on. A girl, whether Asifa, a Muslim minority woman, who was also brutally raped by the people who are what I should say, quote unquote, what I should say, the spiritual persons. And here again it is political. This Hathas incidents also, Manisha was so all these are all really sickening. And there are more and more kind of discussions on caste violence which is happening, and there is all these are all being defined, and domestic violence is on the increase, and other forms of violence against women are also increased in the COVID context. It is reported very much by the National Commission for Women, and also across the globe there were increasing domestic violence cases reported. So it again and again indicates that the society is patriarchal, and the men are supposed to be the breadwinner. Men have been cut off, sort of uh, uh, what I should say, they have framed such that they can't sit back at home. They will have to go outside. Their space is public, and therefore they find it difficult when they were asked to stay back during the lockdown, and that has then extended to the kind of violence and lower work, care economy, etc., had its own implications are there. And eliminate all harmful practices such as child labor. In fact, in the COVID context, it was reported that early marriages and child marriages were taking place, and increased also, because of the reason that if it is done in this particular context, it will be saving the money on the one hand, and also nobody will come and inspect because everybody were in the lockdown, and therefore it was not, even if it was lifted, it was for some time people were not coming out, and they were not really going out to inspect whether this particular marriage is the Charlie marriage or not. That was not the priority also, not in that particular. So that is also to be, and that was one of the targets. and recognize and value unpaid care and domestic work through the provision of public services, infrastructure, and social protection policies, and promotion of shared responsibilities within the household and family as nationally appropriate. So again, even Professor, the Vice Chancellor was also talking about the unpaid domestic care. It has increased during the COVID context, and the state has to really leave alone this particular new normal condition. We will only hope that we will come to the normalcy soon, and sufficient infrastructure facilities enabling the women to go and hire out their labor in the public space must be like the infrastructure required is the creche, the baby care center, etc., and the protection policies also. And if they are not able to come back home in time, there has to be proper transport facilities which facilitate them to reach back, or some crisis center, one-stop center, etc. Then ensure women's full and effective participation and equal opportunities for leadership at all levels of decision making in political and economic and public life. So that is what in the very national empowerment, women empowerment policy 2001 and Beijing platform action, we have underlined that participation of women in public space and equal opportunities for leadership should be the of course the 73rd 74th amendment in the and the parliament also, and the constitution also helped in local body election, and now 33% has become 50%, and more women even before the 50% reservation, more than 33% were elected in certain packets of the society. And therefore all these should come true, but we are not able to really get this 33% reservation for women in the parliament, though we have been fighting for 30 years together. So it has to be a reality soon. And ensure universal access to sexual and reproductive health and reproductive rights as agreed to accordance with the program of action of the International Conference on Population Development. This is one of the major, and Beijing platform of action also. In these two, it was committed by every partner country, a member country, that they have to ensure proper sexual and reproductive health rights. And unfortunately, still there are people who are suffering. Though state is making all efforts, even the COVID context, these women, pregnant women, were walking on their to reach back their home, particularly the return migrants, and they were the men in the family or the members in the family who took the decision to go back home disregarded the kind of pains that the pregnant women will be facing while walking. So unfortunately, several such incidences we observed, and some of them lost their lives also. So if you have ensured proper access to reproductive health, though it was a COVID context, for these mobile women who are on their mobility to go back home, it would have saved their lives. So that is what it is. And way back in the 1995 Beijing Platform Action and also ICPD, it was underlined. Next slide. Undertake reforms to give women equal rights to economic resources as well as access to ownership and control over land. So this is also, again, we were talking about equal opportunities, we are talking about right to health, etc., right to education. We have to also right to own land. So this will be very, very we affirmatively contributing to this women empowerment, and they will have say over the family that they are also owners of land and they have control over that. Many a time they will be owners of the land but may not be having control. So you earn, your earnings will go to people, you have no control over that. You will just hand over to male members of the family, and you will be looking for some money to be coming from them to meet your own basic needs. So that shouldn't be the case. You have to have your own control also. So that is what we are talking about, equal property. And recently the Hindu Succession Act also in the Supreme Court judgment informed that the women can also have share in their ancestral property. That was not the case earlier. So that is what the inheritance. So some such developments are taking place, as you have already signed there in the CEDA. I think you are all aware of that, the Convention on Discrimination of all forms of all forms of discrimination against women, and you have been the signatory, and ratified all these protocols, etc., except certain cultural columns, some 51 or something like that. I really do not remember the number. But there are some such reservations, but still it has signed and ratified. And therefore, you have to you have already been the signatory of these international protocols and conventions, declarations. So you have to necessarily initiate to because you have to submit the report of whatever the actions you have been taking. Then enhance the use of enabling technology, in particular information and communication technology, to promote empowerment of women. So this is one gap, which is even the people who are educated are not comfortable with the technology. They will be choosing to work. Even if you take this mobile technology, the women will only choose to work on certain areas where, whether it is a system, computer or laptop also. So you have to get informed, and the future generation would certainly be, and at least it has to be there in the current generation also. And adopt and strengthen sound policies and enforceable legislation for the promotion of gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls. So this is what, like, you have the Domestic Violence Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act 2005. It is almost 15 years, but still you can't do away with this at all. You kept recent COVID, it was informed that more domestic violence cases reported. So where are we? What is responsible for? You have many enforceable legislation, but still you are not really able to attend all this. So all these, this is what I want to actually convey, that the sustainable goals you have set, but in order to achieve them and make a move towards gender equality, all these targets are to be set. These are only suggestive targets. You have region specific targets where certain areas, you even in India itself, you can take, for example, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, etc. They are well ahead in terms of the achievements of health education. But like countries, states like Bihar, Orissa, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, etc., still they are lagging. So there are also region specific issues, and they have to, their priority would be different, and in certain areas they will be doing better, and not these important. So it should be understood that unless and otherwise gender equality is ensured, where both men and women will have equal opportunity, equal ownership of resources, equal control over resources, and also equally equipped and endowed with the health policies, etc., education, health, whatever the important areas, it is difficult. So that is why I want to convey through this sustainable development goals, particularly this 17 targets, 17 goals, and more than 169 targets set for moving towards sustainable development by 2030. And this is the target. You can't do this without ensuring gender equality. Okay, so next slide is about the very goal, where some statistics given by UN is given, where it says for how many years we keep saying these statistics. 1 in 3 women have experienced some form of physical or sexual violence in their lifetimes. So what does it indicate? You can't just read this and leave. It has a lot of implications as what is happening in this country, why women are put into sexual violence, what does it indicate, who is responsible, what is responsible, why every human being in this globe are supposed to be human beings, why they became barbaric? Because out of one, if you have 3 women, 1 woman is experiencing physical or sexual violence, means your men are responsible. Your society, the patriarchal society is responsible, because this is the sexual violence or physical violence are done by men. That is why I'm saying men. I don't say that women are not patriarchal. Women are also patriarchal. You have been made to be patriarchal. And only 65% of these literacy means literacy status wise 82% men, whereas it is 65%. Every time 20% gap right from the beginning, when women were men were 30%, you were only 20%. When men moved to 50%, you are 30%. When men moved to 82%, you are 65%. So this 20% almost persists since the independence, and this again explains that women's literacy is not a priority. You also have enrollment of girls 100% education, whereas women are only 74%. In the women, how many percentage they now it is 14%, and it is 46% in Panchayat Raj. And the child sex ratio, the juvenile sex ratio is only 914 for 1,000 boys, and the 48.5% they constitute the workforce. I mean the population, whereas only 27 point. Now it has further declined to 25%, 23% instead. So where are we? Why women's participation, economic participation is on the decline? Women's holding parliamentary position is on very minimum. The child sex ratio, it is unfavorable to girls, and enrollment of girls is there, but they are not really continuing on their higher education and in the very literacy. These are all the indicators that they have to be attained through this whatever we have set the targets. And I was talking already about the decent work, and with this I try to conclude. These are the two major areas I wanted to say in that gender context. Of course, there are gender gaps in several areas, but these are the important areas, and some areas would be the outcome of the, for example, you are not equal there in literacy. So that has implications on other achievements also, higher education or whatever, health, nutrition, employment. For example, now I could analyze in my own university the faculty positions. So how many women and men? So it has come to 22% women. And when it comes to leadership position like HOD, Dean, etc., it's very, very minimum, roughly about 5% or 6%. So 96, 94% of the heads of the department happen to be men. So what does it indicate? That the women started coming to higher education only recently, and therefore now they are only a few percentage. Whereas in some 20 years later, maybe more women would be in the leadership position. So that is what the idea is, that more women will join only when the facilities are being provided, and therefore in future you have to also see how best the infrastructure required for the women workers who have their own child care, etc., to be elder care also to be attended. And if there are pressures of child care, elder care, the women withdraw from the market, labor market, and therefore labor force participation will go down. So decent work would certainly be an important prerequisite for retaining the women in the labor market. Leave alone the social constraints where the men now the present, since I just told that only 23% of roughly 1/4 of the women only are working for salary or wage. So 75% of the women are unpaid work. It is not that they are not working; they are on unpaid work. It may be the entire social reproductive activities, the child care, the animal husbandry care in the rural areas. Even you go and work in the field which is unpaid, and also the elder care, etc. So there are around 475 million labor force of 475 million, and 12.8 million enter the market every year. This is about and 2.7 of employed adolescent girls are engaged in hazardous work. So these are the very important statistics that the UN is giving. It is not me giving. And 201 million people are unemployed, of which 71 million are young women and men. So women are also there, and more than 10 million children are employed in some form of labor. So it is all reality. We are talking about elimination of child labor, eradication of child labor, but still it is the UN says that more than 10 million are working. Then 280 million jobs needed by 2050, and already totally there is unemployment of rate of 5%, in which female unemployment rate is 8.7. So these are the gender gaps. So gender gaps means the achievements between men and women, how it is. So another major issue is child marriage. So next slide, which says that if we do not end child marriage, 8 of sustainable development goals cannot be met. I apply this to every other things also. It is not just child marriage. Whatever the other, if you are not educating the girls equally to boys, you are not employing the girls, women equally men, then all these sustainable goals will also be affected. So child marriage is to end so that poverty will come to an end. Zero hunger will be eliminated. Zero hunger will be ensured. Good health and well-being will also be, because child marriage will lead to poor health also, maternal health. And the early marriage means early pregnancy, and that will lead to early child birth also, and both mother and the kid will suffer, and that will lead to health problems. And if you go on spend on health, then your earnings available will be last. So I'll just to underline here that all these 8 variables will be affected. And so this is what the paid and next one unpaid and unpaid work, where I have just brought in the form of the diagram the paid work and unpaid work, how it is affecting the status of women, which really I don't find time to explain, but just leaving it for you to understand. And the gender equal, next is gender equality index. It's already 1816. So I'll take another 5 minutes and try to finish. So gender equality index is can be assured, I mean, can be achieved through these measures. I start from work. So work participation. So it is not simply participation; it is also should be the segregation. So a pool of resources required. So for example, GDP, the gross domestic product, is generated one every year. Can the Indian economy, you get so much GDP. That is the kind of what I should say, the gender segregation. How much is being produced by women? How much by men? How much by transgender? How much by children? You don't have the statistics. So gender segregation should be there. Quality of work. So decent work. That is an 8th goal talking about that. So the work, the area you work must also be quality. Then the money also, the knowledge, the time, the power, the health. So the gender equality, I just started with one, but other 4 or 5 variables are also there. When they are all connected. So for example, power means political, social, economic power. So women must get elected in the, I mean, they in the leadership position, not necessarily electoral politics. So where you will be able to influence and bring new dimensions, new policies, etc. And next slide. This is the last slide, where I just end up saying that sustainable development is possible only when you address these questions of issues which I have mentioned. Gender gap, right from birth to the entire life cycle, women are discriminated. So, and men face different issues, but it is not discrimination, it is a pressure. Like men only should be the breadwinner, and that is really bringing pressurizing them, and if they are not able to earn, the family or the society won't respect them. So men do have problems. That is not discrimination as such, it is a pressure. So whereas for women, it is a lot of discrimination. So all the discrimination attribute to gender discrimination in the society, and that is true for all the other marginalized communities also, be it transgender, the LGBT, the differently abled, the HIV positive, and other rural, urban, rural, less educated, unorganized sector workers, etc., etc. And you all have witnessed in the COVID context how unorganized sector laborers, the migrant laborers suffer, and the state could not come out with the proper policy to accommodate the needs. Even the policy measures like distribution of PDS free and 1,000 rupees cash, etc., did not reach them proper in almost all the months of lockdown. So there are proactive measures to be taken where the state must come forward and in collaboration with, in partnership with the civil society, the developmental organizations, the NGOs, the other support systems available, and also the individually, not just the state, the individual also, everybody should be committed. So the charity begins at home. So gender equality and sustainable development are equally important, and without the gender equality you cannot achieve sustainable development, and without sustainable development you cannot ensure equal access to resources and opportunities for the future generation to come. And therefore, if you really want your own children, your own heirs to really lead a proper life without any scarcity, without any pressure on natural resource scarcity, etc., you have to now itself work on sustainable development, and that cannot be done without the gender equality. I just stopped with this slide, myths about motherhood, where you are saying that mother works, preschool child suffers. So if a mother go to work, mothers go to work, children will get, they will suffer. This is no.
Thank you, ma'am, for your informative section.
Issues, if
You
they
have,
can.
yes,
Yes.
ma'am. Yes, continue, ma'am. Continue, ma'am.
Yeah, I am completing in 1 or 2 minutes.
Yes,
Then
ma'am.
man's job money, women's job family. So even if both, this is sexism. So if a man goes to work, we call that money, whereas women's job is family. So she is, her priority is family. That is what it is being told. So with this, I'll stop, and I really wait for interaction. And if you raise any questions or clarifications, I'm ready to answer. Thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, for your informative section. You have emphasized as to preserve the natural resources as a path towards sustainable development goals. Gender equality is a must for attainment of sustainable development goals. Ma'am, there are only two questions from the same professor, Tirupura Sundari. She has raised two questions. The first question, will a country like India be able to attain sustainable development goals at least by 2030? Will India be able to attain sustainable development goals at least by 2030? One of our questions. And the next question is, which is the most important goal of sustainable development goals, which India was focused more?
Yeah, the very topic itself is gender equality. So gender equality is the base for achieving all the other goals, and therefore, as far as I'm concerned, it has to be gender equality. You try to focus on improving the gender equality, and simultaneously you will be addressing the achievement of the other goals. So that is quote unquote the fifth goal, because being a gender person working on gender equality, I'm saying it may not be the priority for others. They may say that I'll concentrate on clean water, I concentrate on education. But unless and otherwise, you also see that both girls and boys and transgenders are in schools, you cannot see that you have achieved there in education. And unless and otherwise, see the proper drinking water is ensured, in safe drinking water, you will have to walk for a long to fetch drinking water. That is one thing that will increase the treasury of women and girls, because in this given social context, it is the duty of the men and women, sorry, women and girls to go and fetch water. That is one thing. If you are not providing proper water also, it will have implications that will affect the entire family. If proper clean water is not fetched, but that is again the women who will have to walk for 2-3 miles together to get one pot of water in the drought hit areas, then you are ensuring that at least a drinkable water is there in the home. And if it doesn't, then you will suffer. You know, in Tamil, you had Tannir, a film also came, how much it suffered, and it is still the duty of the. And above all, if the, in fact, I visited the extreme part of Valikotam, that is in Ramna district, where I could see one pond where it was about capacity of 5,000 liters of water, in which some 5-6 men were bathing. The other side, the washing of clothes, and the other side, some part of water is being drawn also. There are two categories of water. One is the for washing purpose, other is drinking purpose. And this washing purpose, they were already paying rupees 5 per part. For drinking purpose, they are paying 10 per part. So this is what the condition of water there. So it's all done by women. And now there is a cart also, cart, C-A-R-T. So they just push, keeping some 4-5 parts of water at a time, and they're going. So again, it is a job of women. So in that it is, I'm saying, so gender equality is the most thing. The next, of course, achieving, see, unless and otherwise you have been moving towards, I don't deny that, and that a lot of indicators are being identified to achieve a particular goal. And but I am not sure whether we will be able to achieve by 2030. We will only be optimistic that the sustainable development goals will be achieved by 2030. But though not all the, for example, in, say for example, Tamil Nadu, we have even for the entire India, higher education, the gender gap has come down, but it is not happening in other areas. And if it is education, health, we are still, and I just mentioned about huge regional differences also. So regional differences also will have gender differences. If a particular resource is available or not available, it is scarce, then the society feels that that resource be first given to men and boys. They are going to be the future breadwinners, a future insurance for the families, the households, the entire nation, and therefore let them be the priority. So it will be divided for them. And say, for example, you go to work and any interview you attend, the priority will be men, though in certain categories like teaching, the women will be preferred. And still there are several categories of work where they say one men only, male only. Therefore, achieving the gender, I mean, sustainable development goals by 2030 is the UN's vision. But it depends how you move forward. Even within India, you cannot claim that all the states are doing. One state may move, but you cannot say that India has, because several other states are lagging behind. So it has to be the transfer of resources from one region to other, and more attention to backward and marginalized sections of the population. And the region wise also, most backward states must be given more focus. And of course, Tamil Nadu is really doing, Kerala is also doing well on at least identifying the indicators. They have, for example, in Kerala, they have initiated Gender Park. And what sorts of planning is to be done through Gender Park. And yesterday also there was one news that first time in Kerala, it was, I forgot what is that. So some kind of the focus to capture the needs of the marginalized and the women who had experienced historical disadvantage in accessing to resources, getting equal opportunity, etc., are to be attended and prioritized. And if you move in that on that line, prioritizing the areas and accordingly bring policies and budgeting also, allocate budget, etc., would certainly be moving towards achieving the sustainable development goals by the year 2030. Otherwise, it is difficult. Let us see. Every individuals are also responsible for handling the environment, handling the waste, and disposing the garbage, etc., etc. You have to have a civic sense, but which is missing. So we individuals also are responsible for pushing the sustainable development goals, not attainable goals. So we have to make attainable only when individuals also cooperate. Yes. Is there any other question?
Thank
Thank you for
you, ma'am.
raising those
Thank
valid questions.
Thank you for the clarification, ma'am. Let us be optimistic that we will be able to attain the sustainable development goals by 2030. Thank you, ma'am, for sparing your time with us on a Sunday and also during the Pujo holidays. Thank you, ma'am, for all your support for this program and also for all your support for all the activities of the Center of Women Empowerment and Women Studies of Manonmaniam Sundaranar University. Not only Manonmaniam Sundaranar University, thank you for your coordination and thank you for all your support for all the women centers of Tamil Nadu, ma'am. Thank you very much, ma'am. Sincere thanks to each and every participant for their participation and support for the programs organized by the Center for Women Empowerment and Women Studies of Manonmaniam Sundaranar University. Thank you, my dear participants, for your participation, especially today being a Sunday, and also for your participation expected during the Puja holidays. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, my dear participants.